Dane, Emerick. My position right now is I'm senior campus pastor over pastoral counseling. Well, I grew up in an alcoholic home, and I accepted the Lord at 16. Didn't know a whole lot about it, and I joined the Navy, and I was 17, and it was during the time that the war was breaking out in Vietnam. What had happened was I was on a ship, but I also had different functions because I was on a destroyer, the USS DuPont, and I was a swimmer along with everything else that I was doing. And if anybody got washed overboard, I would have to go tie a line around my waist if it was calm and dive in and grab the person. They would pull us out. And there was a fellow that got washed overboard, and I went down to the fantail of the ship, and the other young man, Tom, came with me. He was a swimmer, but he was to be discharged and sent back to the States to be discharged. And he said, "Let me do it." It was my turn, but he said, "Let me do it." I said, "Sure, I don't want to get wet." So he dove in the water, and what had happened was they were giving him too much line. And now in order for the ship to stay still, the screw of the ship has to rotate slowly. And they didn't realize that the rope was getting caught in the screw of the ship. And before we knew it, we saw his head jerk, and it pulled him into the screws of the ship and killed him. And I had to go down and cut him loose and bring his body up. And this has really worked on me. And I remember emotionally I wasn't handling it well. They were going to send me back to the States to a hospital. And I just stayed in my bunk. I wouldn't get out of my bunk. And there was a fellow on our ship we called him Big Daddy Henderson. And he was an Afro-American. I felt that I was the only Christian on the ship, and I got messed up with drinking and things. And I was in my bunk, and he came over, and this is where the story just really hits. As he came over, and he asked me what I was going through, and I said, the thing is it should have been me, not this other young man. So he was my substitute. Mm-hmm. And the Big Daddy said, you say you're a Christian, I'm not seeing it. He said, "Do you have a Bible?" And I said, "It's somewhere in my locker." And he got in my locker, found my Bible, was back in, and he said, "I want you to read something." And he handed me the Bible, and he had to turn to a verse, and he said, "I want you to read this." So I'm sitting there with the Bible, and I'm like, and he said, "What are you doing?" And so I'm reading. He goes, "Read it out loud." Okay. "I'm crucified with Christ, nevertheless I live. Yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by faith of the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me." And he looked at me and he said, "Emerick, don't you think it's time that you stop fighting the Lord and yield to his lordship?"